So, welcome everyone to Reincarnation and Past Life Regression. This is a Just Bernard special consciousness talk. And I'm wondering if you all could just take a moment and think about reincarnation for a second. Think about what reincarnation means to you. And as well, past life regression. How do you feel about past life regression and reincarnation? Well, let's start with the definition of reincarnation. What is reincarnation? And quite honestly, it has many different meanings depending on who you're speaking to and what belief system they have. But reincarnation is basically the belief that a part of our consciousness will continue living after the death of the physical body. And will be reborn into a new body here on Earth or in another planet, wherever, in the 3.5D, 4D physical realm. This idea of reincarnation is pretty much widespread. Most spiritual belief systems believe in reincarnation in one form or another. It wasn't until I believe it was the Judea. Well, actually, in Judaism there was somewhat of a belief. I believe there are some that actually do believe in it, especially in the Kabbalistic aspect of that spiritual path. But we kind of lost reincarnation. I believe maybe shortly after Christianity started taking hold, where Christianity started using, where you're going next as a controlling factor. Realistically speaking, they used that for control. So the idea of reincarnation was kind of suppressed and pushed aside in order for people to become, more controlled, for lack of a better term. Anyway, it is an almost universal belief, especially in the East. It never really quite got too popular here in the West now, speaking in modern terms. And this is mostly due to the skepticism of mainstream science and the fact that it's not really mentioned in the modern interpretations of the Christian Bible. However, the idea of death in ancient Egypt wasn't even acknowledged. The idea that we died and that was it, or we died and we went to heaven, wasn't a part of their day-to-day living, their day-to-day philosophy, their day-to-day concept. In ancient Egypt, or Kemet, as we know it to be, there was a concept of what they called westing, moving toward the land of the sunset. We were sunsetting. We would move into another land, another realm of existence. So, with this in mind, let's talk a little bit about how is reincarnation possible from a scientific and rationalist point of view. Well, we are pretty lucky. Times are slowly changing, and more reputable doctors and scientists are now investigating aspects of reincarnation, including past life regression, near death experiences, and after death communication. One of the most famous doctors, and I was very lucky to see him several times, he practices, or at the time when I met him, was practicing out of Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in downtown Miami, Dr. Brian Weiss. I'm sure many of you have read his book, Many Lives, Many Masters. But as time is moving on, people are becoming more and more aware of the fact that perhaps maybe there is something else beyond the five senses, beyond this particular reality. So we are lucky that now people are beginning to investigate. Now, in quantum physics, everything, and I mean everything in quantum physics, consists of quantum particles. And these particles can be in one place as well as another at the same time. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the Everett many worlds interpretation that was formulated in 1956 that holds that all possibilities described by quantum theory simultaneously occur in a multiverse composed of mostly independent parallel universes. Now, this was written back in 1956, and if we remember correctly, if you guys are keeping up with what goes around in social media, I believe it was last year or the year before we posted something out from my blog how scientists are beginning to agree that we don't die, that perhaps we move to another parallel universe. And again, very interesting that the Everett Many Worlds interpretation was formulated in 1950, way back in 1956, and just now people are beginning to wrap their mind around it and really give it some kind of credence. So, if everything can be thought as being in no particular place at any particular time, well, places and times are concepts, and we bring with us, well, I'm sorry, places and times are concepts we bring with us to the quantum level. How many of you have seen the split? What is that? The split something experiment? So, where they did the multiple slide on geez, what is the name of the movie? What the bleep? The double slit experiment. Thank you. Anyway, it shows that depending on what we're looking at and the mind of the perceiver, that's exactly what is being observed. It depends if there is an observer versus not being observed. And the same can be said with our consciousness and our energy, for lack of a better term. On the quantum level, distance and size might as well be each other. There is no time and space. And so to cut to the chase, everything can be anywhere at any time at the same time. And if this is the case, then our consciousness can slip and slide, our energy can slip and slide through multiple universes. So if everything could well be anywhere at the same time, what does that sound like to you? In metaphysical and magical and in Eastern philosophy, we talk about chi, the life force energy. In Western esotericism, we talk about the ether. A great example is it's the fifth element: earth, air, fire, water, and ether, spirit. And this is everywhere. So as it begins to sound like the ether that's defined by medieval magicians as the fifth element flowing through the universe, it's fair to say that it's very comparable to the idea of quantum particles, quantum level thinking. We learn from the philosopher and magician Matthew Rhys, ether is very versatile and can be transformed into matter, energy, or even essence by spells. A spell does not detect the presence of ether, since ether is everywhere. Rather, it detects disturbances in the pattern or flow of ether. So let's reel it back just for a second and let's clarify what a spell is. I don't want us to get caught up into the Walt Disney, charmed Hollywood TV version of what a spell is. Nowadays, we're calling it intention, and we're really starting to gain some momentum in the understanding of how thoughts become things and how thoughts are actually energy in themselves. And if thoughts are energy and we are directing our energy in one particular direction, it's fair to say that that is going to create some type of ripple effect on the quantum level, on the energetic level, that which we cannot see, of course. I love the definition, and I believe it was Aleister Crowley who said it, of all people, that magic is merely science that has not yet been discovered, and how much has that been coming into fruition over the last several decades. So if spells are us focusing and sending energy or thought forms, I like to use the word thought forms, and these thought forms basically detect disturbances in the pattern or flow of the ether, then it's fair to say that we are ether. Our spirit is a part of this all-encompassing ether. We ourselves consist entirely in and of this material. And if we think about it, when we look at ourselves honestly, our identities, our names, our personalities, our beliefs, our opinions, even our senses of humor are what we think of as our minds. I talk about this quite a bit, that we identify with the story of who we are, the story of our belief, our personality, our sense of humor. We create this into a thought form and manifest it as something that is, well, for lack of a better term, quote unquote, real. So we actually consist of one-dimensional bits of the cosmic total. If we are part of this entire, well, web of life, ether bits, quantum bits that are just making up everything. We kid around sometimes and say, well, I'm this bit of molecules and you're that bit of molecules, and we just vibrate at a lower level to make it seem like it's dense and make it seem like it's solid or physical or whatnot. So if we are just as well these different bits elsewhere, because the self is essentially the organizing principle, this idea of self, this idea of what we are, is the organizing principle which we have imposed upon this chaos of this ether flowing around everywhere. So therefore, our identities are assembled from this quantum material or ether by the organizing principle of our conception of ourselves. If we want to take it even further, and somebody said to me, actually, I believe it was, I can't remember. Somebody was interviewing me, and they're like, well, what is beyond source? What is beyond mind? What is beyond soul? And I think this is kind of taking us there. That is to say that if our identities, if our souls or whatnot are assembled from this quantum material by the organizing principle of our conception of ourselves, that could be really layered upon the metaphysical or, well, actually the popular philosophy of source consciousness. Where does consciousness come from? I like to think that we are all one part, and I say this in the Book of One. I was instructed that we are all parts of one main soul, that we are merely just pieces of that soul that have developed an identity, that have kind of left the nest for a little while until we return to the wholeness of that one main soul. So if that's the case, we are the ones that are bringing ourselves into being. It's our consciousness that is the gravitational pull. It's the gravity that holds it all together and gels it all together. We basically come from this chaos. We come from the whirling nothing, or the whirling everything, if that's the way you want to look at it. And when we leave this particular body, we return to that whirling nothing, whirling everything, that one main soul. The dust we came from and the dust to which we return are not really there. But thinking it makes it so. Okay, let's wrap our head around around that one. We create the dust. It's very interesting when you have that little glimpse of enlightenment, when you have that little glimpse of nirvana, of clarity, and you begin to understand that everything that is real, the moment we put it into words, it loses well, we lose it. And I share the story quite a bit, and I hope this kind of helps out what I was just saying. Let me repeat what I just said. The dust we came from and the dust to which we return are not really there, but thinking it makes it so. Going to what I was saying now about our perceptions, and I tell this story quite a bit, and I'm going to share it now, about God and Satan walking down a street. And as they're walking down the street, God sees a bright, bright, shining light at the end of the street. And he nudges Satan. He says, "Look, Satan, truth." And Satan goes, "Here, give it to me. I'll organize it." And now that's not to say that the devil is, well, the devil is the illusion, is a metaphor, but that it loses its, how shall we say, its divinity the moment we put a thought around it. When we create a thought, we label it. And I'm getting very heavy metaphysical here, and I hope you're going to follow along with this, but right back to what I was saying. The dust we came from and the dust to which we return are not really there, but thinking it makes it so. So our ability to think us, to think self, to think Bernard, Treva, and everyone of who they are is what creates our identity. It's just a thought. Now, these bits might as comfortably be at the other end of the universe as where they are. In quantum mechanics, things can exist simultaneously at the same time through time and space. So it is only by the act of regarding them or regarding ourselves do we hold them together. It's our perception that is connecting us and creating our reality. I talk about the illusion all the time. This is an example of that. So it is only by the act of regarding them do we hold them together. You assemble your bits, I assemble my bits, and when we cease thinking, they all fly back to the general pool of everything, everywhere. So let's wrap that around our head for a second. Anyway, we're coming up on a commercial break, everybody. So take a deep breath. Try to gather your thoughts and gel them into one pool of consciousness, and we'll be